Good evening from Africa, from a very special place. Some of you may already have recognized the place. I assume many of you today are Africa enthusiasts and have probably watched the movie Out of Africa, not once or twice, but many times, just like myself. And this is actually the place where the movie was shot. Behind me, you see a fireplace where 35 years ago, Meryl Streep and Robert Redford were sitting, and Meryl Streep told stories to Robert Redford, and you could actually see while she was doing it, he was falling in love with her. So this is the house where the movie Out of Africa was shot. And from here, I am welcoming you for a journey through Africa in the footsteps of Livingstone and Stanley. My name is Florian Keller. I am one of the co-founders of Enchanting Travels, and I made Africa my home 14 years ago when I moved to Kenya into this house, which has since then been my home. And this is from where I will take you on this journey through Africa. I hope we will get through this journey. The whole day, we've had power problems, and I want to do a little bit of an advance warning here. We've had the power coming on and off. Every time the power goes off, there's immediately a generator kicking in, but immediately means, probably a minute or so in between, and then I will freeze. Unfortunately, this is the reality still here in Africa. One of the challenges of living here, but the upside will be what I'll be sharing with you today, which is, just the amazing continent that I'm excited to share with you. This is a session which I will take you through. I will take you on a journey through Africa. I'll try to make it as interactive as possible. You will have the chance to ask questions at the end. We'll have a question and answer session, but we'll also have a few polls throughout this session where I want to just hear your thoughts on some questions that we have prepared. So welcome. I'm excited to take you through this journey through Africa. Just before we do this, many of you will know Enchanting Travels, but some of you may not. Some of you maybe meet us for the first time. Therefore, just a few words on Enchanting Travels. Enchanting Travels really has one thing that we are focusing on, and this is tailor-made travel. All our journeys are really designed around the travel dreams of you, of our guests. And even when you travel, you have a personal concierge who will be there to support you throughout the trip. And we do plan trips around the world. Our own journey started in 2004 in India, which is our first country. Then it was called Enchanting India. And then from there, we went out to explore the world on our own. We started Africa in 2006, South America, and then in the last couple of years really expanded to basically all continents. We now offer trips to Europe, to Oceania, to the polar regions, to the Middle East, to Central America, and of course now also to North America. And actually, just as a starting point, just like myself, many of you have probably been sitting at home for a big part of this year. And I imagine many of you are actually keen to venture out into the world. And I'd be interested to hear where in the world would you actually like to travel most? Where's your next trip, hopefully, at least for you, leading you? So Africa is really the topic for today. And let me just move on. This is Africa, how we know it. Of course, all of you will know this. This is the way Africa looks today. But this is not how it always looked like for people from our continents. But before we actually show you how it looked like a few hundred years ago, at least in the minds of the early explorers. So Africa is our topic today. This is how it looked like, how it looks like for us today. But this is not, as I just said, how it looked for the couple of hundred years ago, at least in the minds of Europeans. This is how Africa looked like in the mind of Europeans in 1630. What's interesting to see is that the interior of Africa was blank then. Of course, the early explorers, went around the shores with their ships, stopped there, and that's where they built places, little towns, and that's what you can see here. But the interior was completely undiscovered, and there were just some imaginations of what might be there. And interestingly, of course, here there was a mighty river, coming from some mountains, from some mysterious mountains. And of course, in those days, the big question was the Nile, the source of the Nile. Where's the Nile coming from? Of course, Egypt was well known in those days, and the mighty Nile was there. So somewhere in Africa it must have come from. But of course, it was at that point just the imagination where that might have been. Now, moving on 200 years, in the 1800s, this is a map from 1850, you can see that understanding of Africa was developing. And you see where it was developing, especially here at the Cape region, South Africa. People started to settle. People started to move inland, also here in Southeast Africa. So you started to get a bit of a glimpse of what, in the minds of the early explorers, what Africa actually looked like. And interestingly, a lot of this understanding actually came from slave traders who went into the interior to capture Africans, which then would take overseas. So many of these early maps actually came from those slave traders. But that was at that time that also the early explorers came onto the scene. And the most well-known is probably David Livingstone, who was in the early 19th century, came onto the scene. And it was interesting. He was actually driven, his interest was driven by a humanistic goal. He wanted to actually do away with the slave trade. So his zeal to explore Africa was actually driven by the goal to find alternative economic areas to make use of this huge landmass that would actually replace slave trade. He was a strong Christian, and that was his goal. He came to Africa to basically abolish slave trade, and he came to Africa in 1840. He came to Cape Town, you see here, and then his early journeys took him from the Eastern Cape, you see where today is Port Elizabeth, into the interior to where today we have Botswana, the Okavango Delta. And that's about 10 years. He was a missionary there. He was trying to bring African souls to Christ. And there's some funny anecdotes that he was actually spectacularly unsuccessful as a missionary. Very few people actually, according to some contemporary sources, really were brought to Christian faith. But he found his second calling there, which was really exploring Africa and finding a way to cross Africa and open up the continent for trade, for alternative trade to slave trade. So his second journey then from here, from today's Botswana, took him basically across the African continent to today's Angola, Luanda, and then he went back to today's Mozambique. And he was really the first European who crossed the African continent. And with that, he basically created like a fanatic zeal to explore Africa. The news came back to Europe, and suddenly this was the interest of the day: explore Africa, make this continent habitable for Europeans. He then found funds, and he started another expedition into the Zambezi. Basically, his idea was to make the Zambezi River navigable for ships, open up the African continent for trade. And I forgot one thing. On his earlier journey, he was the first person to actually, the first white person, European person, who saw Victoria Falls. He basically discovered the Victoria Falls. Of course, many people had been there before, but no Europeans. So basically in 1858 to 1864, he basically tried to find ways to make the Zambezi navigable, open up for trade, wasn't successful, and then he therefore looked elsewhere, and he found today's Lake Malawi, spent some time there to explore, and then went back to the East African coast. And then his last expedition was actually in search of the source of the Nile. This is really at that point the holy grail of exploration, because the Nile, of course, flew into the Egypt basin, and whoever controlled the Nile controlled Africa. So having finding the source of the Nile gave you control of the Nile, and that was really the zeal in those days, to find the source of the Nile. And he went out, and he didn't make it. He went to Lake Tanganyika, and he basically disappeared. Sometime along this journey, suddenly the news from Dr. Livingstone stopped coming in Europe. He disappeared. And in those days, he was like one of the most famous people ever. And that brought another explorer on the scene. And this was Henry Morton Stanley, who you see here. He was came slightly after him, and he had very different interests than Livingstone. He wasn't really driven by humanistic goals. He was really more of driven by financial, fame, but financial goals and fame. And he basically came to Africa to find Livingstone. So his first expedition was in 1871. He started in today's Zanzibar, or actually Dar es Salaam, and from there went inland to look for Livingstone, to find him. And this is where in 1871, later in the year, he found, incredibly, Livingstone just on the shores of Lake Tanganyika. And there's this famous quote where the two white men, the only white man at that time in that part of Africa, meet each other on the shores of Lake Tanganyika, and Stanley says, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume." Very British understatement, and that made Stanley famous. He found Livingstone, he returned back to the coast, and now looked for funds to start his second expedition to actually find the source of the Nile, which Livingstone hadn't succeeded in. And he started in 1874 another expedition, and he wanted to find the Nile, and he circumnavigated Lake Victoria, and he actually, without knowing, found the source of the Nile. This is roughly where the source of the Nile is. Ginger flows out. You can see here the Nile flows northwards. And he found this place, but of course he didn't know whether or not that was the Nile. So he continued. He wanted to see, are there possibly other rivers? And he found another big river flowing out of the Nile here onto the west. And he thought, maybe that is a river that goes west and then turns north. So he followed that. But it went actually south, and then he circumnavigated Lake Tanganyika, followed it. And what he didn't know is he had found today, what we know now is the Congo River. And here at some point, his expedition was attacked by cannibals, 2,000 cannibals, and eventually he made it in 1877 on the Atlantic Ocean. He was the first person who crossed the African continent at that latitude. And he had found the Nile. What he then knew, obviously the Congo wasn't the Nile, so he knew now this was the Nile. So this is just a little bit of context to our journey. And what I really want to do is take you on a journey in the footsteps of Livingstone and Stanley. And our journey will take us from Cape Town to East Africa, and it will take on many of the places that the two saw. So we start in Cape Town, we'll go eastwards to the beautiful garden route. Then we follow, just like Livingstone did, into the Okavango Delta, where he was missionarying for about 5-6 years. Then we will follow in his footsteps to Victoria Falls. As we said, he discovered. We follow the Zambezi River to the lower Zambezi National Park. And then on his next expedition, he came to South Luangwa, one of the most beautiful places in Africa. I'll show you Lake Malawi, which he also discovered. And then on his last expedition to Lake Tanganyika. He didn't really get further north on his quest to find the Nile. That's where he actually in 1877, I believe, or 1874, he actually died in Zambia. So the last part of our expedition, we'll actually then join Stanley, who actually went to Lake Victoria, as I've just explained, and then we'll make a little detour into the Serengeti, because that just mustn't, we can't just go there and not visit the Serengeti. So welcome on this beautiful journey, which will start in Cape Town. So you said Cape Town for me is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And what makes it really so beautiful is the combination of ocean and mountains. I was in Cape Town 10 days ago, and I've been in Cape Town many times. And I remember the first time I came to Cape Town, I came actually for business, had a meeting in downtown Cape Town in the morning, and then I had the rest of the day off. So what I did is I went for a hike up to Lion Head, which is here, about an hour and a half hike. Then I looked down, sorry, that was not meant. Then I looked down to the beach, and I thought, oh, wow, they're beautiful beaches. Let me go down. So I went down, I jumped into the sea. Very, very cold, I tell you, but beautiful beaches. And then I went for a sundowner up on Table Mountain. So as I started the day in the city, I went up to the mountain, I went down to the beach, and then I ended at the mountain again. Incredible. There's very few places in the world where you can do that. It's an absolutely stunning place. It's very cosmopolitan. And just outside Cape Town, you have such beautiful landscapes. You can still see the Camps Bay here, one of the outskirts of Cape Town, but you're basically in nature. Once you're there, you just drive out a couple of kilometers, you're in pristine nature. The landscapes are absolutely stunning, and the vegetation is as well. Very specific flora here in this part of the world. And it's really, if you like hiking or cycling or paragliding, this is the place to be. And if you go around Cape Town, you can go to the Cape Peninsula. That's where you see the penguins at Boulders Beach, a very, very charming experience. You can also go into the Winelands, which is a stunning part just on the other side of Cape Town. It's just an incredible place. But Cape Town wouldn't be Cape Town if you didn't have all the beautiful places around it. So you just drive 3 or 4 hours outside and you come to the garden route. I presume Livingstone took much longer, but he did that. So we're now following Livingstone's footsteps, and we come to the garden route. That's what you would have seen. This is Plettenberg Bay, and you see this stunning coastal landscapes. Again, if you like the outdoors, if you like hiking, there's hardly a better place in the world. I took this picture here. This is the trail along Robberg Peninsula. It's absolutely incredible. So for outdoor lovers and for people who want to explore on their own, because it's a wonderful place for self-drive, South Africa, very, very safe, very good roads, very well signposted, fantastic place to travel on your own and explore the stunning scenery. Now, from the garden route, we are moving inland now. So this is what Livingstone did as well. He moved through South Africa into the Okavango Delta. And the Okavango Delta is a very, very special place because it's actually an inland sea. It's a desert, the Kalahari Desert, which is flooded once a year with the floodways from the Angolan highlands and becomes an inland sea, and it allows for very diverse safari activities. There's a lot of wildlife there attracted by the water, and this is one of the unique things you can do in the Okavango Delta. You can do so-called Mokoro safaris. Picture yourself in Venice, in one of the gondolas, someone just pulling you through the canals of Venice, but now picture yourself in the wild. And this is one of the amazing things, and you see the little wonders of the earth. And I remember doing this as the sun was setting, gliding over this very still lagoon, and then you have these little water lilies there, and you pass them, like you see this person here is passing with his camera, and what he would maybe see is what I remember seeing. So you see these water lilies, and sometimes you might see a little frog, clinging to this water lily, and you're just gliding by. That's just an incredible experience. There's no sound of engines or so, it's just nature and you. This is the only place in the world where you can do this. Of course, you can do everything else. You can do game drives, you can do walking safaris, you can do boat safaris, and you can even do horse riding safaris. It's one of the best places places to do horse riding with a lot of wildlife. You see here, you get a sense of what it's like to horse ride in the Okavango Delta. So it's one of the most diverse places of safaris anywhere on the African continent. And Livingstone saw it. He was there to be a missionary, and then he moved on. And a little later, he found Victoria Falls. That was the first person, and he saw it in November. He didn't quite see it like we see it here on this picture. In November, the water levels are much lower. The highest water levels are March to May. That's when you have the flood waves from the Okavango Delta coming, raising the water levels, and the amount of water falling, going down is about 100 times higher than in November, December, because that's the lowest time of the water. And then you're there at this time, there's so much spray that you hardly see the falls when you're on the ground. You actually have to go into the air to really see it properly. But it's an incredible sight. Livingstone described it as a sight that would make the angels marvel in their flight. So he pictured it probably the angels going over it, just like we see it here. It's the largest waterfalls on earth. It's an incredible, incredible place that I think really everyone has to see at least once in their life. From there, Livingstone went on. He followed now the Zambezi River. Remember what I said? He was trying to open up the African continent. Of course, the waterways are the gateway to the African continent. He found the Zambezi River. The Zambezi River is one of the large one of the large rivers of Africa, along with the Nile, of course, and the Congo River. This is what it looks like. This is an aerial view looking east. And what you actually see, the Zambezi River is the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. On the left side, you have Lower Zambezi National Park. On the right side in Zambia, on the right side, you have Mana Pools National Park in Zimbabwe. Both of these are absolutely stunning, and they offer very different experiences than the Okavango Delta, even though they are water-based. So one of the things you can do here are canoe safaris. It's a fast-flowing river, and you can do canoe safaris. You can do it for a morning or afternoon, or you can do it multi-days, and you will see a lot of wildlife. Just like you can see here, the wildlife comes to drink, so you'll see a lot. It's a very adventurous thing to do. You have to make sure that you have to have excellent guides who know the river, because the one thing you don't want to do is come across some hippos that are underneath the water. But it's an incredible experience that is really a once-in-a-lifetime experience. One thing that is really special is that many of the camps are right on the Zambezi River, and at the end of a day or in the morning, you can see a sunrise or a sunset over the Zambezi River. It's an incredible sight, seeing the reflection of the sun in this big African waterway. Now, I don't know if Livingstone would have seen it this way. It was probably much less hospitable than it is these days with the luxury lodges. He would have moved on, and at some point he diverted left, or north, I should say, towards South Luangwa. South Luangwa, for me, is one of the most incredible places in Africa. And it's really incredible, especially if you love outdoors, if you love walking safaris. It labels itself as the home of walking safaris. And that's really what it is. It does justice to this. It has, for a start, the best walking guides in Africa, people who really know what they are doing and who can really make you walk up and close to wildlife. And that's incredible. If you try to walk up against the wind, so that many of the animals who have very good sense of smelling but not such a good eyesight, they won't actually notice you're there, and you try to get close and you really feel you're level with them. It's an incredible experience. Even if you've been to Africa many times, if you experience that, it just makes your hair stand up and makes you just feel so alive. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you will experience this. You'll be somewhere in the middle of the bush, maybe on a waterhole, on a lagoon. There might be a little bush camp, and you'll just have a dinner under the stars. And the stars are just so bright in Africa. There's no light pollution. There's no light, so it's so clear. It's very dry, so you see the lights like you would never see it in Europe or North America. And one thing that is really special about South Luangwa is that many of the operators there have exclusive concessions. So you will never have seen any other travelers. So you really feel like you're the only ones in Africa. And they've built small very comfortable, very small safari lodges in kind of distances of 3-4 hours walk. And you basically walk every day to another camp. And at the beginning of the day, you might have a breakfast over an open fire, deliciously cooked. Then you do your walking safari. Then you arrive at your new camp, you'll have lunch, you have a siesta, and then you'll go for an afternoon walk around camp, and then you have a beautiful sun like bush dinner, as you can see here. It's one of the most romantic and probably adventurous safari experiences you have. So you actually really feel there, I think, probably not so different to how Livingstone might have felt, even though you will have a much more comfortable bed and a proper bathroom, which surely he didn't have. Now, Livingstone moved on. He wanted to explore this part of Africa, and he found Lake Malawi. And Lake Malawi really has two draws. It's, for me, one of the most beautiful lakes in Africa. We'll talk about Lake Tanganyika in a while, which is very different. Lake Malawi has two main draws. One is really encounters with the people. Malawi is really still very much off the beaten path. There's very few travelers coming there, and that means you can really just go on just little walks through little villages, and you'll have these very charming encounters where kids don't ask you for sweets or for pens or for money, because there's hardly been anyone before who might have given them these, and therefore they are just curious and happy to see a white person. So you have very, very charming and enchanting encounters there. But the other draw really is the natural beauty of Lake Malawi. Lake Malawi is incredibly clear. You can see it here. Great for kayaking, great for snorkeling. So it's actually snorkeling and diving. Incredible view underwater here, but it also has stunning beaches. This is a beach on the Mozambican side of Lake Malawi, where you really only reach through boat. There's a very comfortable lodge, kind of hidden in the trees here where my cursor is. It feels like being Robinson Crusoe, and the lodge is actually called Nkwichi. And the reason why it's called Nkwichi is because that is the sound when you walk on this beach. And I've been walking on the beach, and it's actually true. It has this squeaking sound that only this very, very fine sand has. So it's an incredible beauty. You feel like you're the only people on the earth, and you still have the comfort, and you will still have your cold sunset drink overlooking Lake Malawi as the sun sets over Africa, just like it has been before if you've come from the Zambezi River. Now, of course, Livingstone wouldn't have had these luxuries that we have today. He went on to the East African coast and then gathered strength and gathered finances for his last push, which was, as I said, the quest to find the source of the Nile, which he didn't, but he did find Lake Tanganyika, which is also where eventually he found and met with Henry Morton Stanley. Lake Tanganyika is, for me, actually the most spectacular lake in Africa. What makes it really spectacular are these striking mountains. You have these very high mountains that fall straight into Lake Tanganyika. And again, there's two luxury lodges there. This is one of them, Greystoke. You can only reach it by boat. There's no road going there. So you feel like this is at the end of the world. And then on top of that, it is one of the few places on Earth where you can see chimpanzees in the wild. And this is really for relatively fit people. These chimpanzees are in these mountains, and they move every day quite a lot. So you'll basically start in the morning with a ranger, and you'll try to find them. And in most cases you will, but you may have to walk high up on these mountains. So this is really for someone who loves hiking, trekking, and then on top of that, you can see chimpanzees in the wild, which is really a beautiful, beautiful encounter. Now, this was really where, sadly, Livingstone found his end. He would have liked to see the source of the Nile, which is on Lake Victoria, but he was he became ill and died of malaria somewhere here in Zambia, a little bit to the west of Lake Tanganyika, or to the south of Lake Tanganyika, actually. Now, as I said, Stanley came onto the scene. He found him just before his death. And a little later, he went on this expedition to find the source of the Nile. And he found the source of the Nile on Lake Victoria. Now, Lake Victoria is very different. It's the largest lake on Earth. It's not as spectacular as Lake Malawi and Lake Tanganyika. It doesn't have the clear water that Lake Malawi has and the beautiful beaches. It doesn't have the spectacular mountains and the chimpanzees that Lake Tanganyika has. But it is still beautiful in very different ways. It has beaches, it has some mountains, and it particularly has cultural encounters. So if you go there, you can, see little fishing villages. There are many little islands on Lake Victoria. You can have a boat drop you. I remember being dropped by a boat on an island, walking for a couple of hours along the shore of the island, many little villages. At some point, I think we must have had 20, 30 little kids who trailed us and were just excited that we are there. You can go out with a fisherman and go fishing with them, the traditional ways of fishing. So if you really want to have kind of a grasp of what African life is like, far away from modern way of life, this is one of the places where you can see it. And this was where really the northernmost point that Stanley got to. Then, as I said to you, he was then following the Congo River, eventually coming out on the Atlantic Ocean. And we are cheating a little bit here. We are not following him through the central of Africa. There would be other places we could explore. But what we'll do is we deviate a little bit, and we're going to a place, and we'll end this journey at a place that he never saw, Livingstone never saw, but I felt would be really unfair not to share with you, because it is really, in my view, the crown jewel of Africa, which is the Serengeti. The Serengeti is the dream of anyone who wants to see wildlife. The difference between East Africa in general and Southern Africa is really the habitat. In East Africa, you have open grass savanna. You can see for miles and miles, and therefore you see wildlife very easily. In Southern Africa, you have more bush savanna, so there are a lot more vegetation. It's not as easy to see wildlife. So in East Africa, you'll see everything. You'll see the big cats. You will see the leopards in the trees. You'll see more elephants that you'll ever dream about, huge elephants and tiny elephants. And you see the most spectacular wildlife encounter on Earth, which is the Great Migration. Don't know who of you has been in Africa, but the Great Migration is really unbeatable. It's this phenomenon of 1.5 million wildebeest and zebra who, wherever they go, basically finish all the grass that is there, and therefore they are forced to move on. They basically follow the rains, and whenever they've eaten the grass, they move on. And it is an ancient cycle that is more or less following every year the same pattern. You can say when they will pass where at what time. Between July and September, they'll pass the Mara River. And this is really when the migration is at its most spectacular. Then you have the wildebeest coming to this barrier, the Mara River. The Mara River is full of huge Nile crocodiles. So they are really between a rock and a hard place. In front of them, they have the Nile crocodiles. And behind them, they have the lions and anything else that might harm them. And then you see these incredible scenes of just madness, starting with wildebeest jumping from these high water from the side of the river, jumping down into the river, crossing, some of them, falling prey to the crocodiles, others making it, and you will inevitably find yourself cheering for them. Sometimes there are these scenes where you see a wildebeest jumping to the river, and then you see a crocodile in the middle of the river, and you see how the crocodile slowly moves towards this wildebeest, and you find yourself in your heart cheering for this wildebeest, saying, come on, you do it, you make it across. And then you find sometimes it is caught, sometimes it makes it, and you really become part of it. So this is the drama of the migration. This is the drama of the Serengeti, but you also have the other side. You have this beautiful side. You can do balloon safaris, especially during the migration season. Seeing the Serengeti from above will really give you an appreciation of what it means, like a 1.5 million wildebeest and zebra. You'll never really see that from the ground. But when you're in the air, floating either high or just at the level where the trees are, you will see them from above, and that's just an incredible, incredible sight. There are many beautiful safari camps everywhere in Africa, and many of them, this is an example here in the Serengeti, are bush camps, which make you feel like you have a living room in the bush. So it's like a living room with comfortable or even luxurious furniture, and your rooms itself is just like that. You have a comfortable bed, you have a comfortable bathroom, hot showers, flush toilet, but you wake up, you open your tent and Africa is there. You'll wake up, you hear the sound of Africa, you hear the birds sing at night, you might hear the hyena outside, you might walk out and you see some lion footprints in front of your tent. So this is, you feel like you have the comfort and the luxury. You might even have a bathroom with a view, a hot tub, overlooking the savannah with animals just roaming around. That's just incredible. Your days will start often with a coffee or a tea served to you on your veranda. And for me, this is one of the most beautiful moments of a safari. When you wake up, it's very early, it's still not quite light. You sit in front of your tent, you get a coffee or a tea, whatever you like, and then Africa wakes up. You hear the birds sing, you see maybe animals kind of roaming around in front of you, and you have a day in Africa ahead, and you just feel like you're the luckiest person on earth. And then you continue on your safari, and maybe at some point on your safari, suddenly out of nowhere, you come across a table in the wild where someone will serve you a bush breakfast. And again, picture yourself there, see animals roaming around, and you have, all, fresh juices. You'll have, whatever your heart desires. It's an incredible way. You can't have a more beautiful a breakfast than here. And as your day moves on, you might actually at the end of the day have a sundown and again have like a bush breakfast somewhere in the middle of the bush. And that's one of the most memorable moments that you'll probably bring back from Africa, just sitting either on a table with the lanterns or sitting at a fireplace with your favorite drink, and you just have this incredible African sky above you, and then you hear the sounds of nature. You might hear a lion roar in the distance, or you might hear a hyena, or all kinds of strange birds. But of course, you will feel safe because there will be security around you. So no animal would ever come close to such lights anyway. So you will feel safe, but you will still feel part of nature. And if you want to push it a level further, you can just do this and sleep under the stars. There are a couple of lodges in Africa which have like open verandas in front of your bedrooms, and they have beds on rolls. So if you have a clear sky at night, you can actually just opt to roll out your bed on the veranda. Of course, at night you'll have a mosquito net there, and then you'll just lie there and you'll see the stars above you, and then you'll gradually drift into sleep with the stars, with the African stars above you. You'll probably never have such an exciting way of falling asleep. Some may sleep very, very soundly. Some may be woken up by the sounds of nature, and then in the morning come to the guide and say, have you heard the lion? Have you heard the leopard at night? And you exchange stories from that night. So this is just a little journey through Africa. If you end your journey in Nairobi, in Kenya, I would be happy to invite you to my house for a dinner or for a breakfast or a drink in the garden. And this is the house that you may recognize, because this is the house, as I said at the beginning, which you see also behind me. This is the interior, this is the outside, where Out of Africa was shot. This is the veranda here. There are several scenes here of Robert Redford, Meryl Streep having breakfast, Robert Redford falling asleep with a gramophone, playing Mozart. It's really my personal dream of Africa that I've been living for the last 14 years. And I'd be happy to host you as our guest if Kenya is on your journey and you either arrive or leave from Nairobi. It's just at the outskirts from Nairobi. You'll see the Ngong Hills. It's out in nature and it is full of history.